Welcome to Let's Talk Dementia. I'm Carol Howell, your host, and as always, I am just honored when you join me. Reaching folks in over 95 countries, you guys are the reason that statistic is true. Well, it is not normal, not every time we get together anyway, for me to have a guest. I do choose my guests kind of sparingly. I don't like just everybody. But I had the wonderful opportunity to have a conversation with Mr. Patrick Moffett, who lives up in the Long Island area of New York. Patrick, how are you today?
Okay, how are you, Carol? Good to be here.
Doing good, good, good. So now we are sitting here on March 30th, and I am in Southwest Florida, and it's 90 something degrees. What you got going on in New York?
It's about 41 degrees now. We're
Oh,
going to go up to about 50, and
well, you got a heat wave.
yeah, we're starting to. Yeah, exactly. Well, we're starting to see a rise now going into spring, so it's getting a little better.
Oh, good. Very good. So you see that stuff fall from the sky that's called snow, and
Yes,
we
yes.
don't here. I've heard that in our county, it actually snowed in 1970, something enough to cover the ground. I can't imagine. I wasn't here then, but I'm from South Carolina, so I do know a little bit about snow, but nothing like you guys.
Yeah.
Well, folks, Patrick is a wonderful man who cared for his wife, Carmen, and Carmen was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the early age of 53. And as we've talked in the past, early onset Alzheimer's is diagnosed before the age of 65, even as early as someone in their teens has been diagnosed with that. It is a very quick moving, progressing, difficult caregiving journey. And not being any or making anyone feel less about their caregiving journey. But until you've been on an early onset Alzheimer's journey, boy, you don't know tough. And Patrick's done that. Patrick, you wrote a book and you've produced a movie whereby you tell part of your story of life with Carmen after her diagnosis. She was diagnosed at 53, passed at 67 in 2010. Tell them the name of the book in the movie and maybe why you called it that.
Well, the name of the book and the movie by the same name is called Ice Cream in the Cupboard,
Okay.
and we were had a incident where we were in Puerto Rico, and I'm going to get into that if it's okay, Carol.
Sure.
Well, so we were sitting in a restaurant. We were bickering tremendously in New York, and I was kind of passing it off as typical, maybe husband and wife, but it was worse than that, and I knew it. I just couldn't get anything right. And I said, maybe we ought to get away on a little romantic weekend. She was Puerto Rican. And I said, let's go to Puerto Rico for the weekend. Maybe we're both just working too hard. And let's take a break from life. And we got down there on the first day. There was a couple of incidents of her. She just seemed to be angry. And then we went out to dinner in a beautiful restaurant and had kind of a veranda, second floor to it. We were on the outside. And I was admiring the cars, looking over the railing, 52 Chevy, 57 Ford. And wow, cars just, they live forever down here because of the weather and the mechanics and all that. And I turned back and she hit me in the face with an entire plate of steak and lobster.
No.
So I went sailing out of the chair. I was just so stunned, hit my head on the table behind
Oh,
us.
that's not funny.
Yeah, and that family's picking me up, going, wow, this guy's got some life. He must have said something really nasty.
What has he been drinking?
Well, we hadn't done any of that.
And been drinking.
He ran out of the restaurant. I pulled myself up. I was covered with all kinds of sauce and A1 and all this stuff. And I ran out of the restaurant as well and down the main drag of Ashford Avenue in San Juan, trying to catch up to her. And the police saw me running at full speed. And so here's a 6'3" Irish guy chasing a 5' Puerto Rican down the main drag of San Juan. Is not a movie,
Yeah.
And they caught up to me as I caught up to her, and we were able to get everything resolved and got in the taxi, got us to the hotel. She didn't show any emotion at all. We went up to the room and she laid down and kind of took a nap. I said, okay. I was shaking from head to foot because I hadn't realized what happened. I was just too stunned.
Right.
I went out on the terrace and I had 3 of the fastest beers I think I've had in my life. That's all that was in the refrigerator. And because I was shaking, I was just trying to calm down and collect my thoughts.
Bless
I
your
was only
heart.
49 years old. She was 53.
What the heck is going on?
Exactly. And she walked outside and said, honey, I am starved. When are we going to eat? And I said, I tried that an hour ago. And I said, you threw your food at me. And she says, how did your shirt get so messed up, by the way? I said, well, that's what I mean. You threw the food at me and this is where it landed. She said, you just joke around too much with me. Sometimes you over tease. I said, I'm not joking. She said, oh, come on. I wouldn't do that to you. I love you. Why would I throw a plate at you? So now I'm even deeper in what could this possibly be? Something disappeared from my mind.
Did you
That
start
traumatic.
questioning yourself then?
What's that?
Did you start questioning yourself, your
Yes.
memory of it?
Did something have she trying to get rid of me?
What is
We
this?
did separate for a little while legally. And is this her way of doing? I mean, I was just trying to reach and grasp some straws, you know. And
Hmm.
so I got on the plane the next day. I said, I got to get out of here. I don't know what this is. And I tried to explain to my kids, and they're going, let me get this straight, Dad. Mom hit you with a plate across the table from a restaurant, and you weren't arguing, and you didn't say anything bad. I said, no, that's the whole shocking thing. Of course, none of the kids knew it. They were all in their 20s and they didn't understand.
Right.
And then, she calmed down a little bit, and it does taper down at times. And I noticed that she was starting to forget more, but she wasn't as angry. The anger issues were coming less and less, and then they go more and more again. So we came home from food shopping, and she put the groceries away as she always did. I went to the cleaners, came back, and I see this white liquid coming down from under the cabinet, from under the cupboard, as she called it. And I said, let me look here. And I opened up the door and going through the canned goods and trying to trace where this came from. And sure enough, I find a deflated box of Breyer's vanilla ice cream, our favorite. And
Mm-hmm.
it had melted in the cabinet. And I said, honey, it looks like you put the food away at lightning speed today. And I said, because you put the ice cream in the cupboard. And she said, I didn't do that. Why do you blame me for everything in the house? Why did you blame those damn kids upstairs? Of course, there was nobody living there but her and I and the dog. So now I'm just getting rolled over here by all this. And of course, she got angry again. And she had refused to go to a doctor. This was about a 3-month span, 2-month span from Puerto Rico on up. And I said, tomorrow, if I have to, I got to throw a net over and get her in the trunk and take her to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Something is really, really wrong here. And I just had no clue. Little did I know that the school system where she worked had told her that day, listen, Carmen, if you don't get an exam over at the hospital, we made an appointment for you. If you don't do that, we have to fire you for cause. The kids' bus passes were all going in the wrong direction. Parents were calling saying, don't put my child on the bus. I'm coming to pick her up. Of course, she hung up the phone with Alzheimer's. Okay. The call
Oh,
never existed. The child is sitting in front of her door by herself. The parents are calling. That's what got all that going. She did go to get that exam because the
mhm.
school said, if we have to let you go for cause, you're not going to get any support from the state of New York.
Oh, wow.
No disability insurance. If you get diagnosed with something, at least you have some income. She went and she was diagnosed that day and then came home that night and said, honey, can I talk to you for a minute? And we sat down together and she said, I have a touch of Alzheimer's. That's
Mm-hmm.
all this has been about. I've been so frightened.
A touch of
Yeah,
Alzheimer's.
yeah, a touch of Alzheimer's, which is almost like almost pregnant. And I knew right then I went, I'm in for a rough time. This is going to be
Yeah,
bad for her terribly, but it's going to take its toll on me.
absolutely. Absolutely. Such a incredible story. You tell them the story about when she became violent and punched a 90-year-old man.
Yeah, that was because we had a situation where I was hiring people, which I always recommend that caregivers really give a lot of thought to, especially if it's spousal and it's early onset, which most of the time it is.
Mm-hmm.
Think about getting that help and support from the
Amen.
outside. You have to take care of yourself. And that's what I was doing. And then, but she started to push the housekeeper around. I hired a professional Alzheimer's caregiver. She was beating up on her and throwing things at her. Finally, everybody just quit and said, Mr. Moffett, we feel so bad for you, but that we just can't. This is dangerous for us to work here.
Right.
The housekeeper left and that, and I was still trying to work because I remember getting recommendations that from Alzheimer's professionals saying, don't quit your job.
Right.
You're going to need this at some point in time. And there's going to
Yeah,
be a
for
thing.
your sanity.
Yes, exactly. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
you need that break. So I said, okay, but now what do I do? I got people quitting on me. So I talked to the doctors and they said, well, it's an Alzheimer's center here at the Long Island Jewish Hospital, and they have a daycare center. So you can drop your wife
Mm-hmm.
there. She
Mm-hmm.
can stay there. You can pick her up after work. All right. It was very pricey, like everything else. We went through our bank account like crazy.
Oh, I hear
But
you.
it was good. At least I could come to work. My bosses didn't. They said, if you come in late and leave early, don't worry about it. Just take care of your wife. And so everything went along pretty good for like, well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. We was picking up and dropping off. And then one day I had a call, and it was from the daycare facility. And they said, Mr. Moffett, you better come here today. We've had an incident and we got to
Mm.
report it to you. Your wife is fine, but you need to come here today as soon as you can. So I left work, and when I got to the Alzheimer's center, they said, we had an incident today where your wife punched out a 90-year-old man in the facility.
Mm.
And he was pretty bruised. And I just dropped my head and I said, oh my God, here we go. Here it
Mm.
is again. And they said, we feel that, we had to have you here, but we need to let you know that when we have an incident like this, where there is an Alzheimer's stricken patient strikes another patient or causes damage to another person, the facility and the caregiver's family of the person that caused the incident are legally responsible for damages. I said, holy smokes, this is like, how could this be, And but fortunately, the elderly man, his family understood Alzheimer's.
Oh,
Kind of everybody knew Carmen's case. They said, we're not suing anybody.
good.
We just feel so bad for you that this happened.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
of course, the facility said you need to remove your wife from the facility
Right.
by Monday. And
Yeah.
that's the end of it. We can't watch her that closely. She's too fast. And that's why I try to tell caregivers that early onset caregivers, this early onset, the changes in it's like a light switch.
Yes.
It just goes off and they're gone. Something will happen. And if you're not right there, you're going to say it's going to be a bad incident.
So then Carmen moved to a skilled nursing community.
Well, not quite at that point. I discussed with the doctor. He said the first thing, because she's such a violent case, we need to find out what cocktail of antipsychotic drugs are going to work to get her into some kind of state to
Mhm.
put her anywhere.
Well, this is true.
Right. So I said, well, what do we do? They said, we have a facility. It's a hospital center called the Cottage Facility in the same area. And they said, what we do there is we will test all of these drugs. It takes about 3 weeks. She will be with us 24/7. There'll be someone sitting with her 24/7, taking all the notes. And at the end of these 3 weeks or so, we'll come up with what drugs are working. And then we'll have another meeting and we'll say, and hopefully we'll be sending home a much more calmer Carmen.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. This in the meantime, it's good for you to take a break anyway. The doctor said, take a trip and don't make it a guilt trip. Make it a guilt trip. Go somewhere, visit family, but try to get out of New York, get out of the house. Maybe if you want to spruce up the house a little bit for when she comes back, that would be nice. But other than that, take a break and take a good breather. You earned it. And I did so, and I went away for maybe 4 or 5 days. But when I got back in 3 weeks, they called me, and the two psychiatrists came in with the director, and they said, Mr. Moffett, we found 3 drugs that we can blend together that seem to work. But frankly speaking, they cannot be administered at home.
Mm.
This is not a pill or an injection. This is something that has to be monitored. They're going to give it in a liquid form, like in a cup sort of thing. But we're not even sure, her case is so bad, we're not even sure how long these drugs will work. Could be a month,
Right.
right? If you try to bring her home and you're sleeping and she convulses during the night and you call 911 and an ambulance comes, what are they going to do? They're not going to know what to treat her for. They're going to be looking for heart and this and that. They won't know anything about these antipsychotic drugs that's in her system.
Right. Right.
So you're risking yourself, her life, your life, and anyone she comes in contact with. So we highly recommend, we can't tell you not to do it, but we highly recommend you go to 24/7 full-time care, skilled nursing.
Right.
And that's how it's happened.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. Now, I believe you told me that Carmen had 2 sisters and a brother that also had early onset.
Right. After Carmen, her older sister, Millie, who's older by a few years, was stricken. And then her brother, and then her younger sister, Evelyn, was right after that. So it was 4 out of 4 siblings. And I began to learn a lot about genetics, which of course you know very well on some of these early onset cases. It's almost always genetic.
Mhm.
4 out of 4 siblings, you can almost guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was able to track it back with one of the elderly aunts down in North Carolina.
Oh.
And because Carmen was kind of military brat when they came from Puerto Rico, her uncle was in the army and he kind of brought the family into Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg.
I got a hold of an aunt and I said, can you tell me, because I have nothing to run it back on. How can I find this traceability for genetic? And I said, can you tell me about Emil? I knew Carmen's mother died of cancer, and she was very lucid when she died.
Okay.
But I didn't know anything about Carmen's farm except that he died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was an alcoholic. So I asked the aunt, I said, can you tell me anything about Emilio, or Dad? Anything about his behavior? She said, well, he just drank too much. He was always falling down. She said, but there was one odd thing that kept happening over and over. I said, what was that? She said, well, he was a cutter in the Garment Center in Manhattan, in New York. And he would go out to lunch and he couldn't find his way back to his job that he'd been at for 30 years.
Oh my.
Uh, there
Yeah.
it is. And then I started to get in and I started to ask some more questions. And I found that he was getting lost on his way home from work, rode on the wrong subway, things he was doing automatically like a little machine, he couldn't do anymore. So
So
that
sad.
was the connection that I made from
Yeah.
the father, not the
Yeah.
mother.
I hear you. So now you two had children,
Yes, we
and
had two boys, and she had three girls from her first marriage that
okay.
came with us too. So we had five altogether at the time.
So normally what we see with early onset Alzheimer's is a very strong genetic component with the APOE4 gene.
Right.
Have your kids or her kids opted to be tested for that as carriers of that gene? Are they doing that?
No, they're not. And my oldest stepdaughter, Laura, one of the twins, is a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And we took Scott to South length, and she said, Dad, based on the genetic connection that we have here, and she said, I've been studying this. I have Alzheimer's doctors all around me. I don't want to go through the rest of my life waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Mm-hmm.
We pretty much can almost guarantee we have that gene.
Mm.
And the finality of saying, yes, you've got it. Here's a piece of paper. Just, I don't want that. And my
Uh-uh.
sisters and brothers don't want it either.
Yeah. Oh, I am so with her. And I don't have early onset Alzheimer's in my family. I do have late onset Alzheimer's in my family. And recently I had a neurologist tell me you should be tested for the APOE4. And I said, no, I should not, because I said, why? Why? And he said, well, then you can make lifestyle changes. I said, or I can make the lifestyle changes now and not get that gloom and doom lying on my head 24/7. And those lifestyle changes have been a part of my world for about 2 years now, very stringently. Living in my house, Patrick, is no fun because there is no Briars. There's nothing, no sugar, no gluten. Yeah, it's just a boring place to eat, but getting healthier by the minute. So I totally get what your family, and I support your family's decision in that. But you also told me about a friend who had a heart attack 4 days after starting caregiving. Caregiving's a hard job, and that's why I do what I do, is to bring hope and
Yes.
smile and joy. But talk about that a minute.
Well, that was one of the vice presidents at Vox International Corporation where I worked. One of the other vice presidents came to me and said, my brother's wife has been, she's 51, and she's just been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And he said, I'm totally stunned. I'm seeing what's happening. I can't believe, I feel like I'm living your life that we watched you go through. Here it
Mm,
is again. I feel like I'm living Pat Moffett all over again.
yeah.
My brother, feels it anyway. So I gave him the best advice I could, and you would do the same thing, and what to do kind of thing. And I said, tell him not to quit the job. Okay. Stay with that. Okay. And get help early. Okay. Don't linger on with this thing, because things are going to happen.
Yes.
And they're going to happen so fast. I said, but he's going to get run down. And so this actually went on about when I had the last conversation with this fellow Rick about his brother. I said, the biggest thing here that I see, and I see Alzheimer's caregivers and professionals all the time, social workers, heart attack is big. Okay, because the immune system is crashing, and that's sometimes the first thing to go. You're
All
just
that stress.
completely out of sauce on stress, and your diet is not right. You're a
Right.
ticking time bomb. And 4 days later, after making that statement to Rick, his brother had a heart attack.
Oh my word.
Fortunately, somebody was home at the time. Someone came. He was able to get a neighbor, was taken to the hospital, and he was saved. He
Mm.
couldn't believe how on the money. And he says, my brother came home and ordered a caregiver to help him out right away.
Yes,
But I
yes.
wish I would have listened to Pat Moffett a month ago.
You know, those are words you've said a whole lot. You should listen to Pat Moffett, right?
Yeah, there you
You've told your kids that for years. So, helping my clients to understand their need for professional care for their loved one is often one of my biggest challenges. That and helping someone know they should not be driving anymore. Those are two big
go.
things in the
Yeah,
caregiving
exactly.
world. But realizing that we cannot do everything and we do have to have professional help. And that's not hiring Susie Joe who lives next door and needs a few bucks. That's hiring somebody that knows what they're doing, or else seeking group living, assisted living, memory care,
Right.
whatever is appropriate for a person. But you told a very sad and moving story about a woman in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Do you remember that story?
Yes, I do remember it. Yeah.
Tell our listeners about that.
Well, March 3rd up here in New York, we had about 20 inches of snow on Long Island.
And that's why I don't live there.
That's why you don't. And out in Pennsylvania was much heavier. They got about 27 to 28 inches. And the next day, I read on, I was going through Yahoo News, because you don't see these cases put on regular TV, but I was reading Yahoo News and they said, Allentown woman with Alzheimer's dies on the street in snow.
Mm,
And I read the article and it said, woman got out of her house. They didn't mention anything about caregivers or anything. Somewhere in the middle of the night, went right out in the snow. And of
mm-mm.
course, they don't remember how to dress for different things.
Nope.
They don't know how to do that. Got 8 blocks from her house in Allentown, just 8 blocks. Became totally disoriented. Some buried herself in the snow. Maybe a snowplow might have thrown more snow on. Nobody saw anything.
My
At
goodness.
4:30 in the morning, which leads me to believe that maybe the caregiver was asleep. Maybe the caregiver was drinking. I know I drank. I
Mm,
mean, I had reached a point that I needed a few drinks just to go to sleep for a little while, just to get a few hours.
right.
Maybe that was the case, but she was reported missing at 4:30 in the morning, and that was an odd hour of the
Sure.
day. It might have person. I don't even know if there was a caregiver there to this day. The Allentown police haven't returned my calls yet. I'm trying to get in touch with the family and see if I can offer them some assistance.
Right.
But that was the case, and I'm sure they're kicking themselves right now, saying, "God, I wish I would have got a
Yeah.
24-hour person, something like that, full-time care." And you see the snow out, and people say, "Well, Martha won't be going out today because it's snowing." Well, that's when they're going to go.
You can just about count on it.
So
Yeah.
it's a very, very sad case. The woman really didn't have to die, but and she was
Mm.
just 67 and had Alzheimer's for about 3 years.
And with the folks who have late onset Alzheimer's, it is often very difficult to project if they will be a wander risk or not. Sometimes we kind of know if they're just sitting on the sofa 24/7 and we can't get them to get up to move anywhere,
Right.
they probably are not going to wander, but they still could. But
Right.
when we're dealing with early onset Alzheimer's, the only thing you can assume with early onset Alzheimer's is that something's going to happen that you were not expecting. That's about the only assumption because everything else is absolutely a possibility. And
Yeah.
that's the scary part.
Yeah, I mean the what they maybe I mean shoulda coulda woulda as we say, but maybe one of those door alarms that you put under the door where
Yes.
someone tries to open up the door and it sets off the alarm.
Hmm.
My when my I got away for a couple of days and my son said, "Dad, I'll stay with mom. And you just take a break for a while." He took my recliner from the living room and put it against the front door and slept in the recliner so mom couldn't climb over and take it out.
Now that will work.
And I found out that story last week, and I went, "Really? I didn't know you did that one." We were so frightened, all of us.
Smart guy, though.
What you were going through. He said, "I decided to come up with that idea, and
Mhm.
mom never came downstairs." He said, "But I was ready."
That's it. And
That's
that
the
was
first
one
time it
problem
came.
he did not have to deal with. So,
Yeah,
kudos to him.
yeah.
So, Patrick, if you could give our listeners one piece of advice as a caregiver that will have an impact on their world, what would that be?
Get the early help that because it's going to save your life.
Hmm.
When Colin was first diagnosed, and I first met with the doctors the first day, Dr. Giselle Wolfglein, a famous geriatric doctor, said, "Mr. Moffett, this disease can claim two victims,
Hmm.
your wife and you."
Amen.
And I was just stunned for a second. And I said, "Because you're going to get run down, your immune system's going to fail, vis-a-vis the story I told a little bit earlier.
Hmm.
Okay? And we can't lose you because then you're no help to Carmen."
That's it.
So that's why that's so good, because you're really saving two lives. I can't give a better piece of advice than that. And
Yeah.
it's very hard because the spouse always wants to say, listen, I can take care of my wife or my husband. I'm
Mhm.
married to them. I can do this. I'm good. You're not
Right.
going to, this is such a wild disease. At
Mm.
that age, you're going to only hurt yourself.
Yeah, I am totally in agreement with you, my friend. And it's very hard to let go of your expectations of yourself
Yes.
when you aren't able to, quote, live up to those expectations. And then you feel like that you have potentially that you're a failure or you're unsuccessful, when in fact, those are not realistic expectations to begin with. And realizing that does make life a little easier for everybody, including your children.
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt like a failure when the doctors told me that. And even though all of this evidence was there, I still now, no, I must have made some mistake here. There's no reason why she can't be coming home. What do you mean that they can't be administered at home? Isn't it like Advil or something?
Yeah.
And no, they said these drugs are very powerful. And sure enough, Carol, when she was in the nursing home, even under those three drugs, she wound up hurting another male,
Mm,
bumping into the male and just swung twice and bruised him up. I got another cold again.
wow.
Now there's no place to run. You're in the facility. I can't take it
Oh,
any further.
right, right.
It's
But
just
they
not.
let her stay there
I hired a full-time caregiver inside the
inside.
nursing
Yeah,
facility.
that happens a lot.
That's all I could do so I could keep my job.
Right, right. And then they have to protect the residents, so you understand
Absolutely.
their
Yeah. Yeah.
predicament.
Sure.
Such a sad and moving and funny and encouraging. You've got all of those emotions covered in your story, and I thank you for that. Ice Cream in the Cupboard is a wonderful book and now just a fabulous movie. Tell folks how they can find both the book and the movie.
The book is on Amazon. You can print on demand on Amazon
Yes.
they have now, or Kindle. And the film is on Amazon Prime. If you're a Prime member, it's free, but it's also on YouTube and Fandango and Apple TV, iTunes, Google Plus, and a lot of the platforms
Right.
that you can find it on different places.
Perfect. Guys, I hope you'll check out both the book and the movie. And Patrick, you have been inspiring for me as far as sharing your story and being open and very real, because there is nothing about dementia caregiving that's um, well, that you can make pretty. It's just tough. I mean, there are funny days. There are things that I'm sure even you look back on and go, that was fun. But as the journey continues, those moments and those times become fewer and fewer, and the difficult times become harder and harder. So
Yeah,
I feel,
Carol, people should also, one book that I read was Let's Talk Dementia.
oh, I
Yeah.
love you.
And I read it, and it's amazing, especially some of the fun things that you said in there where, it's okay to laugh, but with the patient, not at the patient
Not
or the
at the patient. No one wants to be laughed at, I don't think. I don't. It doesn't make me feel good, but I do love a little humor. And, scripture says, laughter doeth good like a medicine. And
yeah.
that's one medicine I think we should partake in very liberally every day, like those 3 beers you took down quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope, well, before I say goodbye, tell folks where you are in your life now, because I met the new Mrs. Moffett just a little bit ago.
Yeah, well, we're living out and she's working from home here, of course, so it's a good system for me.
Right.
But we're out in Deer Park, Long Island, about 50 miles from New York City. And what did you ask me before that? Was there something else?
Just how wonderful she is.
Oh, she's great. She's great. And when we got married about a year and a half ago, and it meant so much to me when it said "till death do us part."
Oh,
Sometime when I was a young man and got married first after Vietnam, and I was sort of a scatterbrain. I didn't have my feet on the ground, and you're just saying a bunch of words.
right.
You know?
Not
And
this time.
but now after all this time and watching what Carmen went through, and then finally passing after 10, 12 years, when I said that to Marlene, I knew what that meant. It came right from the heart. Death to his part is what I mean.
Mm,
It felt stronger than ever.
You're gonna make me cry. I hate to cry. I don't do pretty crying, so don't tell me that story anymore. It's very moving, and I love you for that. And I know she does too. We had a little bit of trouble, folks, getting Zoom started so we could record this. And Carmen to the rescue. Yay. I was so glad you
Marlene to the rescue, Marlene.
I'm sorry, Carmen wasn't a little slip there. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this interview here with Patrick Moffett and his wonderful book and movie, Ice Cream in the Cupboard. Do check it out. The book on Amazon. You can find the movie on Amazon Prime or on YouTube and various other platforms. You'll be glad you spent the time in your world to learn more about his story. Patrick, I pray God's blessings on you
Thank you so
and
much.
Marlene, and that you find joy and peace that you never knew existed. And when you look back on your life, every once in a while, you take that right hand and you put it over your left shoulder and you pat yourself on the back and go, you know, dude, you did the very best you could do. And that's what we're called to do, is
That's what
to
we
be
are.
our best, you know, and we can't be more than that. So
Thank you, Carol. I hope we can do something again too. It'll be fun
absolutely.
as time goes on.
Thanks, guys, for joining us on this episode of Let's Talk Dementia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.